Good morning. Thank you for calling Ritz-Carlton, Philadelphia. How may I assist you?
Hi, I'm looking for Hugh Volways.
Oh, please allow me to extend your call.
Hello.
Hello, Chris. It's Anil.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you this morning?
Good.
So that's a great nom de plume, Hugh Volways.
Yeah.
Do you still have people chasing you up into the hotel rooms?
No, it's probably not so much of a precaution required these days as it used to be. But, I guess we're just used to having pseudonyms after all these years.
Well, we're going to split the interview between Squackett and Yes, and I'm not going to ask you all the usual Squackett questions, but I'd like to get more direct with that and just ask you to describe the chemistry you share with Steve that drove its direction.
Well, fortunately, when I met Steven, I met him in Brazil in the 80s for a hi, how are you? But apart from that, I never really had any contact with him in the 70s. I don't think we ever played a show with Genesis on the same bill. So it wasn't until 2007 when I was doing my Swiss Choir album in London, and basically I needed a guitar player to play guitar parts, and my drummer, who I was using, Jeremy Stacey, suggested to me that to give Steve a call, and because he'd probably do a good job, and I did, and he had some time, and he got involved with that, and he did a great job, and so our relationship was off to a really good start there. And then, of course, after he'd done that for me, I said, well, can I play anything for you so that you need me to help out with, or demos or anything? And so that relationship started there, really, and I played on a few things that he was preparing for whatever future project he was getting. And during the course of that, it just became a natural thing that I was working on his music, and then I played him some things that I'd been writing, and then it occurred to us one day that we should just do an album together. And so we just carried on in that direction, and we carried on writing together, and it was a really simple and easy process, and no stress involved, and no record companies or anything with deadlines. So we, just one day we had an album that we done, and we had to wait for a little while before we made a deal with it, because Steve had some legal things he had to sort out in his life, and we also wanted to find a good record company to fit, and eventually, of course, we went to Cherry Red, and we're on their new Esoteric label, and so I'm really glad the album's out now.
What is it about the two of you as a musical combination that works? What strengths do you play off?
I don't know. We got on very well as people, and we enjoyed each other's sense of humor, I think, as well, which was kind of a bonus. And we mustn't forget also, of course, that there's a third member of this team, Roger King, who's been working with Steve for many years as his kind of a production cohort and writer, and so he was involved in the keyboard parts and the production of the album very much, and it was like a three-man team, really, and we just all seemed to get along very well. I don't know why, but I'm glad we did.
Well, it's a very structured, focused set of melodic statements. Was that by design, or did that just evolve organically?
Yeah, it just evolved. I mean, he had some songs that he'd written that he wanted to, record, and I had some, and we both liked, each other's material, and it was a very painless process, I have to say, working with Steve, and the we usually would, I guess, go out somewhere for dinner after, working in the studio during the day, and it was actually my wife who came up with the name Squackett, because whenever the restaurants would ask for a reservation name, she just would say, "Oh, it's Squackett," and then that kind of stuck as the name of the band. So once again, just a nice chemistry with Steve and his wife and my wife. We're all good friends.
Now, you put the album together in Steve's living room, and obviously the last Yes album was put together in Trevor Horn's studio, so that must have been quite a contrast for you.
Yeah, well, Steve also has a studio in Twickenham, where he lives in Richmond, and then St. Margaret's is like next to Richmond, and that's where he has a small studio as well. So we did quite some of the work in the studio, but we didn't really need to be in the studio to do the vocals, because as you know, these days it's all pretty much done at the computer console. And so we did quite a bit in his living room, which also added to the relaxedness of the project.
Where did you record your bass parts?
In the studio.
The Twickenham studio?
Yeah, in the Twickenham studio, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what was it like to record in a living room after the Trevor Horn?
Well, I mean, it's not actually a strange concept to me. I've done that in my own places of residence, over the last 20 years, so it wasn't the oddest thing in the world to do.
Tell me about the bass guitars you focused on for Squackett. Was it your usual regiment?
Yeah, well, I had my Rickenbacker in London with me at the time, and that I think I played that on most of the tracks. And in fact, Steve wanted me originally to play that. He wanted the authentic Chris Squire sound when I first started doing demos for him. So he wanted me to use that instrument. But also on the title track, Life Within a Day, I used my Meridian bass, which has been a favorite of mine over the years, and I've had since the 70s. And that's a very good sounding bass. And then, strangely enough, the Yamaha representative in London wanted me to try this new bass guitar that they had out, in 2007, and he brought that down to the studio, and I just tried it out and played a couple of riffs, and then that developed into a song. So it's a fairly Jetson-like sort of instrument with blue and red lights in it and stuff. So, but it sounds really good. So that's on the second track on the Tall Ships.
So you have this very chordal approach to the instrument. How does that jive with the Squackett song structures? Is that something you can talk about a little?
Well, I think I may have used that technique a little bit on the title track on The Life Within a Day. There's a little bit of that, but most of the rest of the songs are pretty much, one note, straightforward bass lines, and there's a bit of that on the title track.
Do you feel your bass approach continues to evolve over the years?
Yeah, I think so. Especially as Yes has been pretty active in doing live shows over the last 4 years, since 2008, and and a lot of technique development purely arises out of playing live, really. And I think the way I actually pluck the strings has evolved over the years. I mean, when I first started, as you know, I use a pick a lot. But as times evolved, the way I hold the pick is kind of slightly different now, so that when I strike a string, the pick hits the string first, but like a millisecond later, I actually play my side of my thumb also plays the same note, like a like a millisecond later. So you kind of get the hardness of the attack of the pick, and then you get the roundness of the sustain, which comes from my thumb, really. So that's a technique that's kind of just naturally developed without even me thinking about it over a period of years, and it kind of slightly a more mature tone probably that I have now than when I was younger. And I don't know, as far as my left hand's concerned, I think that's pretty much the same. I like my instruments to sound good. I just evaluate each new song and each new piece depending on what kind of a bass part it is. I try and put as much character into the part as possible.
I've got a bunch of yes questions for you, and Benoit David was doing great. What led to his departure?
You know what it was? Benoit it wasn't really suiting his lifestyle to be away from his home, which is in Montreal, and he had issues with kids of his that he had to deal with, and he was often away when things came up. He had teenage sons that were kind of going off the rails a little bit, I think. And so it was just a combination of various things like that he decided that it wasn't really the life for him.
Alan White recently said it wasn't his dream.
Well, I think that what Alan meant was that Benoit did the job, and he did a great job, and he certainly sang very well on the Fly From Here album, and Trevor Horn was happy with his vocals and the production, etc. So, I guess his heart just wasn't really in being the lead singer of Yes, and for whatever reason, So we moved on, and thankfully, of course, we now have John Davison, who's fantastic, really good singer, and his heart is definitely in it.
Apart from being able to replicate John Anderson's sound, what qualities make John Davison the right guy to...
Well, to start, one thing he has over Benoit's position is that John's also a writer, and so in fact we even started to look at possibilities of material for the an album which we'll probably record at some point next year, I would imagine. So that's definitely a plus in John Davison's column, and to have any new member that comes into Yes, for them to be a contributing member, not only as a musician or a singer, but also as a writer, is always a big plus. The thing is about Yes, it's an evolving thing, and now it's going to evolve with John's input and influences as well, and so it may be slightly different from the Yes of 10 or 20 years ago, but it'll still sound like Yes, I'm sure, but it'll just have some new flavors there.
Fly From Here was largely dependent on some earlier writing. Are you looking at creating a lot of brand new things?
Yes, I would imagine, yeah. There'll be slightly different concept. There was that desire on Trevor Horn's part and on our part as well, myself and Steve Howe. We were very keen on reviving the Fly From Here music that we hadn't actually finished around the time that we were working on the drama album, and so we were into that idea of evolving some of that material, and of course, along with that, the Fly From Here track, it also brought in some of the music that was also written around that time that hadn't been developed. But I would imagine what we do on the next Yes album will probably all be totally fresh and new.
Do you think it'll be Trevor Horn again?
I'd like to think so. I enjoy working with Trevor a lot, and yeah, I'm hoping that he'll have the time to be able to fit it in. He has quite a busy schedule generally, I think.
People identified the spiritual side of Yes with John Anderson, and I'm wondering if you feel the new music still possesses a flavor of that.
Steve and myself have always been writers as well, along with John, and you know, I mean, maybe John wrote some of the more spiritual type stuff, but I don't think our writing, it doesn't contain that element to a degree. So, you know, we'll see how that pans out. And as I said, that you have to add John Davison now into the mix, and you know, he has lyrical ideas. So we'll see how it all comes out in the wash.
Does any form of spirituality inform your life?
Well, I'm not one of those who, I mean, you know, like, for instance, some people I know actually put time aside during the day to meditate, and I kind of do the same thing, but usually when I'm in the shower. So it's like, but I don't attach any, you know, religious belief to, you know, the whole kind of, you know, meditational thing. But I do think about things, and so, you know, I suppose you can say that's meditating. But as I say, I do some of my best thinking when I'm having a shower.
You're obviously aware that Yes music is highly spiritual. It's actually a form of spiritual practice for some of your listeners. So what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it means something different to each listener. And of course, what they take away from the lyrics, you know, is usually personal, I think, to the listener. And the same thing can mean something different to a different listener. And so it's hard to define, really, you know, what the level of spirituality is, and, you know, between one song and the next. You know, as I said, different people will take different things away.
Fly From Here was quite commercially successful, and Frontier seemed to have been highly effective in marketing it. What made their campaign so effective compared to...
I have to say they were a lot more effective in Europe and other parts of the world than they were in the US. You know, comparing the numbers of what they were able to do in Europe. It should have done actually even better, even though it did do well in the US. So we'll see what happens there, because, you know, when we do a follow-up album, you know, we obviously would like it to have the best commercial chance possible in the US, because that's obviously one of our biggest markets. The
album still sold dramatically better than previous albums. What would you ascribe that to?
It was also a very good album, which means a lot. You know, I mean, we got a lot of critical acclaim on Fly From Here, and in the British press, a lot of the classic rock, prog rock magazines, you know, put it in their top 10 best albums of 2011, and you know, so obviously it got people's attention.
Did you feel like the pressure was really on when you had to make that one? You knew you had to step up to your best possible game?
You know, making any album is always like, you know, there's a certain amount of pressure involved. But I have to say, once again, as far as making a Yes album with the other guys and, you know, the team that we ended up with, which of course included the return of Jeff Downs and Trevor, producing, you know, that we have always gotten on well as a group of people, and so you know, we had a pretty good time making the album. There wasn't a lot of pressure on anyone there, other than just really, I suppose, some time pressure, you know, and the usual financial constraints of you know, having to stick to a budget. But apart from that, though, we all had a good time.
we're in an interesting area. We have bands like Aerosmith and Van Halen and Kiss, and they're still playing arenas, and they're only essentially playing their back catalog. Why do you think Yes had an issue with contracting audiences?
Well, I think in the case of Kiss, you're dealing with a comic book fantasy to start with. I mean, it's kind of almost like The Simpsons, you know, like being the biggest sitcom ever. You know, it's like people just identify with that timeless, never getting old characters in The Simpsons, and in a way, because of the makeup, you know, Kiss can be seen like that as well, you know, and I think that's just some kind of human nature that we all share, that enjoys that kind of cartoon, comic book kind of longevity, and you know, all power to Kiss for coming up with the concept and sticking with it, and you know, and the fact that they still have these big audiences is probably also that they probably pad the bill with people to draw audience as well. And you know, for Yes, it's been, you know, different times, bigger albums, of course, bigger crowds, and you know, at the moment, the tour we're on is going very well. Everything is pretty much sold out, or almost sold out, and you know, so we're doing pretty well. So I guess it's just down to making an album that captures people's imaginations, and I guess catches more of the fringe fan base, you know, as opposed to the hardcore people who, of course, who will probably like anything we did. But we have good audiences, and you know, recently I've noticed there's a lot of young people, you know, current day teenagers in our audience. So that's always a healthy sign.
Well, the interesting thing about Fly From Here is you seem to completely throw out any notion of doing something commercial, really.
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, it wasn't aimed at particularly, you know, trying to, you know, get a Owner of a Lonely Heart #2 or anything. But, you know, I'm not opposed to commerciality. If one is lucky enough to come up with something that becomes widespreadly enjoyed, then, you know, that's not a bad thing. So if that happens again, well, that'll be lucky for us.
Yes fans have these incredibly lofty, demanding expectations of the group. What's your approach to considering the constant feedback they're providing, especially over the internet?
Well, I tend, you know, to only, I have a slightly cautious, you know, point of view when, you know, reading fan input. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people who love this, and there's other people who love that, and you know, sometimes I think the opinions are a bit off, and sometimes I think that, you know, they're good. So you know, I take really what the fans want to say with a bit of a pinch of salt. And at the end of the day, when we make music, we're really making it for ourselves. I mean, that's the main thing. You're in a room with a bunch of guys making music, and the object really is to come up with something that you enjoy in that room, and then hopefully when it leaves the room and goes out into the wider population, that you know, it catches the imagination of the listeners out there too.
Now, this Yes on Broadway concept that you've been talking about, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's really something that is just been talked about. It's kind of on the back burner at the moment, and we keep like mulling it over. You know, the idea would have been to some kind of like history of Yes concept, you know, and include past and present members if it was you know, physically and financially possible to do that. So that's loosely the idea that's based around. But at the moment, as I said, it's kind of, you know, we're out here promoting Fly From Here, and, that's going to take care of this year, and then, as I said, probably next year we'll be looking at doing a new studio album with John Davison. So that idea may not surface for a while.
Why on Broadway?
I think we were just looking at that concept as opposed to Vegas or Atlantic City, which is where, of course, a lot of people try and do a kind of a residency sort of thing, and it works for some acts and it doesn't work for others. So I think we were just really, just putting the idea out there, maybe to see if anyone who controls the theaters on Broadway would come back to us and suggest something. But we've had a couple of inquiries, but we haven't. It hasn't really gone that far yet.
You play on Billy Sherwood's Prague Collective project and his forthcoming Supertramp tribute. Tell me about the rekindling of that collaboration.
Oh, well, Billy and I, we've worked together a lot over the years, and then we didn't for a while because I'd moved out of LA and back to London for a few years, and just because of the geography, we had a break from each other, and now I live back in Phoenix, Arizona, so we're relatively close again. So we just we'll probably get together from time to time and do various things.
What is this Prague Collective?
Well, it's something more that Billy's at the helm of. It's his relationship with the record company who's doing that. Is it Cleopatra? I can't remember who it is. But it's a concept that Billy and the record company have, and I guess they've asked him to go around and see how many prog musicians he can collect to play on various things. So that's as much as I know about that.
Are you a Supertramp fan?
No, it's just Billy was involved in that project, and and I was just visiting him, and he has a studio in his house, and we just spent a few hours just messing around. Really, I'm a friend of Roger Hodgson's, and I actually did some work with him once. There was an idea afoot to do a band with Roger and Trevor Rabin and Alan White and myself, and we went stayed at Roger's house in Northern California for a few weeks and worked on some material, but it was another one of those things that fizzled out and didn't go anywhere.
Actually, wasn't the idea on the table that Roger Hodgson could become the lead singer of Yes?
It wasn't so much the lead singer of Yes. It was more to do. It was going to be a different project. Whether that would have evolved into that at some point, I don't know. But we weren't looking upon it as being Yes. On the Talk album, he collaborated on a song called Walls with Trevor and myself and Alan White.
I'm told that you're working on your autobiography. What can you tell me about it?
Well, I'm actually working on it with my friend Vincent Gallo, who's best known in the film industry for his contributions. But he and I are working on it, and I'm just doing interviews with him, and we're recording them, and we'll see how that ends up. Vince and I have been good friends for years. In fact, he's the godfather of my son, so he's a huge Yes fan. And you may remember he actually used part of Heart of the Sunrise in Buffalo 66, and the outro music as well. He used Sweetness from Yes's first album as the credit music at the end of that movie.
Various members of Yes, including you and ex-members, have spoken about the idea of Yes continuing beyond your lifetime.
Yeah.
Is that a serious consideration, the idea of rebooting the band with younger players?
Yeah, that was, yes, I mean, it is possible, much like a city symphony orchestra that, of course, all over the world, the London Symphony Orchestra and American Symphony Orchestras are hundreds of years old. And so I've recently began to think that, that Yes, there could be a Yes in 100 years' time or 200 years. time from now, and apart from some amazingly modern medical breakthrough, I doubt I'll still be in it. So, so the concept of, people coming in and the Yes tradition, if you like, being carried on is definitely a concept. Yeah, I mean, it's not anything that I spend time thinking about, but I mean, it's just by the natural progression of Yes and the fact that there's still a Yes after 44 years, and has led to that trend, really. I mean, I always remember that, when I was young, that you used to have like these soul bands and, some of those Terror Motown sort of acts, that wouldn't have any of the original members, but they'd still be touring. And so I guess that could apply to Yes and other rock bands as well.